water is dark. 21 miles of cold channel water separating two nations locked in total war. And somewhere in that darkness, something is moving that will change everything. The Germans know the ships are there. They can hear them. They've been tracking their movements for weeks, watching the pattern, waiting for the right moment to strike. But they haven't struck. And with every hour that passes, that decision becomes harder to reverse. Britain and Germany have been bleeding each other across every frontier the ocean allows. Submarines, surface raiders, mines scattered like seeds across shipping lanes. The North Sea has become a graveyard, measured not in miles but in tonnages lost, in hulls broken open and swallowed whole. Germany's plan was simple: starve Britain, cut the arteries, make the island choke on its own isolation. For months it worked. British merchants went down in flames, convoys scattered. The Atlantic became a killing floor and Germany's U-boats owned it. But there was always one route they couldn't fully close, one narrow passage where Britain refused to yield, no matter the cost. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the jugular vein connecting Britain to France, to resupply, to survival. If Germany could cut it, truly cut it, the war might tilt in ways no army on land could reverse. They tried. They laid mines until the seabed bristled with them. They sent destroyers on night raids, fast and brutal, hoping to catch British patrols off guard. They positioned coastal guns along the French cliffs, waiting for convoys that had no choice but to pass within range. And Britain kept moving ships through, every single night. The question wasn't whether Germany would strike again. It was whether Britain could keep enduring what came next. The Dover Patrol. That's what they called it. Not a grand fleet. Not battleships with names that echoed through history. Just destroyers, trawlers, drifters, anything that could float, fight, and somehow survive the crossing. Their orders were impossible. Keep the straits open, protect the convoys, sweep for mines, hunt U-boats, engage German destroyers if they come. Do it every night, in the dark, in waters so contested that every shadow could be an enemy hull. The men aboard those ships lived in a state between vigilance and exhaustion that had no name. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were taken cold. The horizon was never safe. A plume of smoke could mean a convoy, or it could mean a torpedo had found its mark 3 miles away and you were already too late to help. Germany watched this routine, studied it. They had advantages: shore-based artillery, faster destroyers. The occupied French coast gave them positions Britain could only dream of. And yet, the attacks didn't come with the frequency Berlin expected. The decisive blow, the one that would shatter the Dover Patrol and seal the straits, kept being delayed, postponed, reconsidered, because something had changed. Britain wasn't just defending anymore. It started small, a minefield where Germany didn't expect one. A patrol that appeared in the wrong place at the wrong time, disrupting a planned raid before it could develop. Coastal batteries on the British side that fired with accuracy no one thought possible in the dark. German captains began filing reports that didn't match the intelligence they'd been given. The British were faster to respond, better coordinated. Their destroyers moved like they knew where the threat would come from before it materialized. And they were aggressive. There's a difference between defending and refusing to let go. Britain had crossed that line. Dover Patrol destroyers began hunting at night, pushing into waters Germany considered theirs. They didn't wait for U-boats to strike first. They depth-charged on suspicion, on sonar ghosts, on anything that moved wrong. Trawlers, wooden fishing boats refitted with guns that had no business being there, started, escorting convoys with a stubbornness that bordered on reckless. They took fire. They took hits. They kept moving. The psychological weight of it pressed down on German commanders like deep water. You can plan an attack when you know the enemy's position. You can time a raid when the pattern holds. But when the pattern breaks, when the prey starts hunting back, the calculations change. Every sortie became a risk assessment that didn't add up cleanly anymore. Then Britain did something Germany hadn't thought possible. They built a wall in the water. Not steel, not stone. a barrier made of lights, nets, minefields, and detection systems that stretched across the straits in overlapping layers. The Dover Barrage. It wasn't perfect. Gaps existed. U-boats still tried to slip through. But it forced them to slow down, to navigate carefully, to surface in places where British patrols were waiting with deck guns loaded and searchlights ready. The straits, which had been contested, were now controlled. Not entirely, not without cost, but enough that Germany's calculus shifted again. Sending destroyers into the barrage meant running a gauntlet where every advantage they once held, speed, surprise, darkness, was eroded by British preparation. The shore guns could target them, the minefields forced predictable routes, and the Dover patrol, scattered across the approaches, had become something Germany didn't want to admit: lethal. German destroyer captains began to hesitate, not out of cowardice, out of mathematics. The odds of a successful strike were dropping. The odds of losing ships, fast, modern destroyers that couldn't be replaced quickly, were rising. And Britain just kept sending convoys through, every night, like clockwork. There's a kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing you're supposed to act, but every time you prepare to move, the cost looks worse than it did the day before. German Naval Command felt it. They had the tools. They had the firepower. On paper, the Dover Patrol shouldn't have been able to hold. But paper doesn't account for the moment when a captain realizes he's being hunted in waters he was supposed to dominate. It doesn't measure the weight of reports coming back saying the British are here and here and here, always where they shouldn't be, always ready. It doesn't count the nights when a raid is planned, forces assembled and then called off because the intelligence says the British moved positions again and the window closed. Time was passing, and with it, the initiative. Britain's convoys kept moving. Reinforcements kept flowing to France. Supplies kept reaching the armies that were grinding Germany down on land. And the straits, the narrow choke point that was supposed to give Germany control, had become a symbol of something else. British refusal, not victory, not triumph. Just the blunt, unyielding fact that they wouldn't let go. That every attempt to close the passage would be met with minefields, destroyers, coastal guns, and men who had stopped counting the cost. Germany could still attack. But the question gnawing at every planner, every officer, every sailor watching the dark water between Dover and Calais was this: what would it accomplish? The raids slowed, not because Berlin ordered them to stop, because the officers tasked with executing them stopped recommending them. The risk-to-reward ratio had inverted. British defenses were no longer something to bypass. They were something to survive. And survival wasn't guaranteed, even for Germany's best crews. A few more attempts were made, small probes, night attacks that pulled back before full engagement. Each one confirmed what German intelligence had been trying to ignore. The Dover Patrol wasn't weakening. It was tightening. More patrols, better coordination, faster response times, and behind it all, the steady, relentless movement of British ships carrying men and material to the front. The Straits of Dover, which Germany needed to close, had become a passage they couldn't afford to contest. Not because they lacked the strength, because Britain had made the price too high. There's no single moment when Germany gave up on the straits. No declaration, no formal withdrawal, just a gradual, grinding realization that the window had closed. The big raids stopped, the destroyers pulled back to other operations. The coastal guns fell silent, their shells reserved for targets that might actually yield results. And the Dover Patrol kept moving, night after night, convoy after convoy. The same cold crossing through waters thick with memory and wreckage. They didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. The war wasn't over. The Atlantic still bled. The trenches still devoured men faster than nations could count. But the straits stayed open. Britain had held one passage, 21 miles of black water, and refused to let it go, even when the logic of war said they couldn't. Germany had the power to attack. But they'd seen what happened when they tried. They'd watched the Dover Patrol absorb losses, adapt, and come back harder. They'd counted the cost of every raid that failed, every destroyer damaged, every advantage that evaporated in the dark. And somewhere in the calculus, in the reports stacking up in Berlin and the captains standing on darkened bridges, staring at the lights of Dover, a decision was made. Not to win the straits, to avoid losing more trying. The water is still dark, 21 miles wide, and it will stay that way until the war ends. Britain's ships will keep crossing. Germany's guns will keep watching. But the attacks won't come. Not because they can't, because the cost of trying has become something Germany can't afford, and Britain has made it clear they'll pay any price to keep this one route open. There's no triumph in this, no moment of relief. Just the slow, grinding pressure of attrition, where one side refused to break and the other finally stopped, testing whether they would. The Straits of Dover remain open, and that silence, the absence of raids, the quiet passage of convoys through waters that should have been killing grounds, speaks louder than any battle could. Germany learned something in those dark waters. Some things, once you've seen what it costs to take them, aren't worth the price. Even when you have the power, even when you need them. The question that haunts every calculation, every war room, every officer staring at a map and knowing what should be possible is this: what happens when your enemy simply refuses to let go? Britain answered that question in the Straits of Dover. And Germany stopped asking.